I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and today we're reviewing the Skoda Kamiq that many of you have been waiting for. It's the Monte Carlo, and it's the first one to arrive in Australia with the turbocharged 4-cylinder engine rather than a 3-pot. In the Skoda lineup, the Monte Carlo grade is reserved for vehicles that are a little bit sportier than the product that sits underneath them. They generally have a sports suspension, some sporty highlights on the interior, and also a few components that look a little bit more aggressive outside. And that's exactly how it goes for the new Kamiq 110TSI Monte Carlo. So you can see that the car comes with a bit of a black pack. It's actually not quite black, it's more like a very dark metallic grey here on the grille and on the mirrors, as well as on the contrast roof and the roof rail. So it actually looks a little bit more menacing than the standard car, where all of those things are fitted in sort of silver or chrome. Now we also get Monte Carlo badging here on the side, a little checkered flag. I mean, it's only got 110 kilowatts of power. You're not going to be burning too many people off with the lights, but you know, it's nice to imagine. And then we also have these 18-inch Vega alloy wheels, which I think look pretty cool on the Kamiq. But the changes also continue inside this spec of small SUV that's $36,990 drive away, and that's where we're going to jump next. Stepping inside the Kamiq Monte Carlo, and it's much the same recipe as the exterior of this car, and that's taking the really pleasant underpinnings of the Kamiq and giving it some, you know, subtle sporty touches. Now this is not a Kamiq RS, even though I think that Skoda should make a car like that. They should also make a Scala RS while they're at it, I reckon. It is a Monte Carlo, and that means you're going to pick up things like these coffin seats, which have prominent red patterns on them and white stitching, and then also some sort of racing stripes in the middle of the seat. And then on the same steering wheel as the base Kamiq, you have red stitching replacing white stitching. So that's another small touch that you get on the Monte Carlo. No real change to the shifter apart from the red stitching in the shift boot. And then we also have kind of fake carbon fiber trim across the dashboard, which is a bit naff in my opinion. But quality in here is good, significantly better than a Volkswagen T-Cross, for example. We've got soft touch materials up here on the dash, and even on the doors, which is really quite nice for a small SUV at this price point. Though the Monte Carlo is getting up there in price, particularly given you still have to option some desirable features like the travel pack in order to get wireless Apple CarPlay on this screen up here. But it is a nice, crisp 9.2-inch screen, high resolution. And you also get a virtual cockpit as standard across the range, but you will want to get a car with navigation fitted, or else you'll just be looking at, you know, a screen which is pretty much the same as what an analog display could do. Now the seats themselves are quite comfortable and supportive, and we've only got manual adjustment, but we do have seat heating, which is nice to have in winter. It is most certainly not winter today, but practicality is all right. We've got wireless charging up here with a guide for your phone, 2.5 decent cup holders, an armrest, but sadly it's not height adjustable, so for me it's never quite in the right spot. And I will just point out there is one practicality nightmare, and that's that if you want to turn up the fan, you have to press a button here and then tap in the screen. And given Skoda's slogan is simply clever, I'm not sure how that fits in, because it's neither simple nor clever. It's nice to just have a knob here for the fan instead of having to go tapping around, but hey, what can you do? At least the bottle holders in the doors are quite big, which is important on a hot day like today. Let's check out the back seat. Okay, so I'm now sitting behind my own driving position in the back of the Kamiq Monte Carlo, and you can see that this car is just packaged in an expert manner. It really is quite small outside and very easy to park, but the fact that a 6-foot adult can easily sit behind another 6-foot adult with room to spare is a big credit to this vehicle. So that's my height. Headroom, I've got another inch sitting behind this panoramic sunroof, which is optional. The sunshade is a little bit sheer. It's a bit of light through, but it isn't too bad. Legroom, really good, several inches ahead of my legs, and toe room's good too. Now there is a center seat. The tonally on the floor is really high, so I'd pretty much forget that it is even a seat, apart from the really odd occasion where you might need to take a 5th person. But 4 adults will fit in the back of the Kamiq with no problem. Now the view forward from the back is definitely obstructed by these sports seats, but you can kind of look through the center and see out the front window well enough. We do have air vents back here, really good for Australia. Heating on the outboard seats as well. We don't have a center armrest, which is a bit of a shame, but hey, that's just what you got to deal with. And then the materials switch to hard on the top of the doors back here, but we have a cloth insert with a bit of padding on the lower part of the door, and then slightly smaller bottle holders than up front. But all in all, the back of the car is packaged really nicely. Heading around here to the back of the Kamiq, you can see the main change on the Monte Carlo is the black accents. So instead of silver or chrome trim for the Skoda lettering, we've got that in black. Same with Kamiq, and then also this diffuser down the bottom. Looks kind of cool, I reckon. And like all Kamiq specs, from the base model all the way up to the top of the range limited edition, above this we have a 400-litre boot and a power tailgate, which gets out of your way nice and quickly. Now, we've covered on this channel many times Skoda's net fetish, and I'm so glad they have one, because it means that you really can tie all your stuff down here in the cargo area. It's not going to slide around and cause you annoyance while you're actually exploiting the chassis of this car on a good road. So we've got a net on the bottom, net here, one over here, in fact double net over here, nice, and then a couple of cubbies off to the left and right, plus heavy duty hooks, much better hooks than most rivals for hanging shopping on, for example. Then we've got a button to close the power tailgate. We can jump in the driver's seat and see what this latest addition to the Kamiq range is like on the road. So what's the Kamiq Monte Carlo like to drive? Well, that's an important question, because for a lot of people, this is the Kamiq they've been waiting for, or at least the 110 TSI engine, which you can get in either the slightly sportier Monte Carlo trim or in the more traditional limited edition trim, which has the same comfort suspension as the base model. So you can kind of choose your adventure with either a car with a sports suspension or one that's a little bit more laid back, and that's really going to be a subjective thing. But all I would say is that the base Kamiq already wasn't that soft, so the Monte Carlo really does kind of amp up the stiffness of the Kamiq. Not in a bad way, but you're certainly going to notice the imperfections in the road. So if that's what you look for in a little car like this, then the Monte Carlo is going to be your bag. But it's really all about that engine. The 110 TSI is a 1.5 litre turbocharged petrol 4-cylinder. It isn't the 1.5 Evo that the Europeans receive. Instead, it's Skoda's small update of the very familiar 1.4 litre turbo petrol that has been used in small Volkswagen Group cars for many years now. The outputs have remained the same, 110 kilowatts of power and 250 newton meters of torque, and that torque is available from a really broad plateau between about 1500 and 3500 revs, and that just gives this car, oh my goodness, just absolute muscularity, you know, for its size and for its relative displacement. You know, this is a small engine, but it just has urge everywhere. It feels raring to go. It's quick enough off the line, and then more importantly, for country buyers, it's also a lot more confident for overtaking in rural areas. The standard engine in the Kamiq, and the one that's been on sale for about 6 months, is the 85 TSI, and that is a 1 litre turbocharged 3-cylinder petrol, making 85 kilowatts of power and 200 newton meters of torque. And the 85 TSI is not a crappy engine at all. It's actually really impressive. Fuel economy wise, it's terrific. It'll do sort of 5.5 litres per 100 Ks without breaking a sweat, and you know, it's also very torquey. It's just that the 4-cylinder, it's more refined. That's the biggest thing you're going to notice straight away, is how much quieter the 110 TSI is. 4 cylinders are innately more balanced than 3 cylinders, so there's less vibration, there's less harshness to the engine, and if I just accelerate here, the engine note is quite clean and quite pleasant in the Kamiq 110 TSI, whereas in any of the Volkswagen Group's small cars with the 85 TSI power plant, it does have that kind of chugging 3-cylinder sound to it, which some people really like. I don't mind, but the 110 TSI definitely sounds better. Now, it's hooked up to a 7-speed DSG dry clutch automatic, and it's a good example of the DSG. You know, the Volkswagen Group has refined these gearboxes for many years, and while the wet clutch versions of the DSG are typically known for having better longevity, the latest versions of the dry clutch gearboxes are also very good, and the way they drive around town is broadly similar to a torque converter, unless you do a lot of unusual maneuvers like reversing up quite steep hills, you'll notice that there's a bit of push forward before it locks up and starts to reverse. But it's certainly not a gearbox that I would describe as quirky anymore, and I think it's quite lazy to describe it that way. Now, the handling of the Kamiq Monte Carlo is really good, actually. The stiffer suspension means it turns in with a bit more verve. The 4-cylinder engine does weigh a little bit more than the 3-cylinder, and so normally that would have a blunting effect, but that's been reversed by the stiffer springs at the front end, and then it goes actually further than just reversing it. So the Monte Carlo does feel the sportiest of any Kamiq. It's quite keen. Any vehicle in the lineup of the Kamiqs is a good handler, you know, more interesting to drive than most cars in this segment. But the Monte Carlo is the best at that. Fundamentally similar though, we've got torsion beam rear suspension like all cars on this version of the MQB A0 platform, and that does get a little bit loud over kind of urban bumps, but actually it's not as bad as in some other vehicles on MQB A0. And the ride isn't as sharp as, say, a Polo R-Line, a vehicle which we do actually own as a family. So I would say it's a little more comfortable than that, but it's sort of equally sporty. But I actually prefer the Kamiq to a Polo or a T-Cross because it's just a nicer place to spend time. You know, you're gripping a really lovely steering wheel, soft materials, feels more upmarket. These seats are also really good. That being said, this car is like 37 grand drive away or thereabouts, and that's quite a lot of money for a fairly basic vehicle in terms of the chassis that sits underneath it. So certainly give it your close consideration, but I think if I was buying a Kamiq, I'd just go for the base manual and pretty much leave it at that, but you know, it's entirely up to you. Now in terms of safety, it's pretty good. We've got frontal AEB, we've got reversing AEB, we've got adaptive cruise control, we've got lane keep assist, really good lane centering in the system as well. And then it is possible to go further with an option pack which brings blind spot monitoring and rear cross traffic alert, and all Kamiqs have a reversing camera as well. So those are my detailed impressions of the new Skoda Kamiq Monte Carlo with the bigger turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. Make sure to like the video if you did in fact like it, share it with your friends who might be considering buying a car like this, and leave me a comment down below with your thoughts on the Kamiq lineup now that it's been enlarged with a few more options. And of course, around me right now, you'll be finding options to subscribe to the channel, and I really encourage you to do so. You can also watch our latest video and also all of our coverage of the latest SUVs here in Australia. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.